we'll be having the procession. May I equally acknowledge another distinguished professor, the professor of anatomy, the vice academic planner of ESUT, our director of academic planning, Professor Chike Anibeze, a man with an atomic pen. He'll be here today to deliver the citation of a professor of chemistry education. Equally, I can cite the presence of the former secretary to the state government in the person of Honorable Dr. Dan Shere, the former pro-chancellor of this great institution. Exchanging pleasantries with the Vice Chancellor.
Che bella cosa la luminata sole, la via serena dopo la tempesta, per l'aria fresca parecchia la festa.
Ladies and gentlemen, the procession for the 57th inaugural lecture of Enugu State University of Science and Technology is on. I welcome you, the former Vice Chancellor of this great institution, distinguished Professor Cyprian Onyeji. I welcome you, a great man. Your footprint is indelible. I welcome you. Because do you need the side there? Oh, no, a great man. A great man. Please may we rise as I welcome the former SSG of Enugu State, Akajugo. I welcome you, Dr. Please, can you the arrival of the 57th procession of the inaugural lecture of this great institution. The arrival of the procession for the 5th inaugural lecture of this great institution. welcome you once again, the former SAG to the Enugu State Government, a man of God, Akajugo. I welcome you, Dr. GOC Aja. MNI, you are welcome. Procession, we have past inaugural lecturers, including distinguished Professor Ngozi Namani, Professor Adonai Okechukwu Okonkwo, Professor Michael Anyawokolo, Sishine. Professor Pascal Okoli, Professor Chioma Oleka, former Dean, anthem. Anthem. permission of the Vice Chancellor, may I invite Professor Michael Anyawokolo to lead us in the opening prayer. Brief opening prayer.
Let us pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father, we thank you for keeping us alive to see today and for making this day memorable to all of us. We pray that your presence will be with us, that you be with the inaugural lecturer as he delivers his lecture, and that all we learn today will help to promote development in this country. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
You may get seated. I welcome you to Enugu State University of Science and Technology. I welcome you to the great institution where we have a great leader, an innovative leader, where we celebrate excellence, we celebrate innovation, and will continue to celebrate excellence. I welcome you to the 57th inaugural lecture of this great university. I welcome you as we celebrate a scholar today, a professor of chemistry education. I welcome you, an erudite scholar, a well-celebrated professor of political science of high pedigree. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming the award winner of Pillar of Education in Nigeria, June 2026. Join me in welcoming a man that came and saw and is conquering. A man within his administration has given us about 4 faculties, new faculties, about 14 departments. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming to this great event the Vice Chancellor and the Chairman of today's event, Professor Aloysius Michaels Nabogo. I acknowledge our able Vice Chancellor, a man of honor, distinguished Professor Chike Nwoha. You are welcome. Our able Registrar, I will always acknowledge Nonye Jofo Ganalele. Sir Ambrose Ogo, you are welcome. Our able Provost, College of Medicine, Park Lane, Enugu, distinguished Professor Uchenna Ekwochi, I acknowledge your presence. Equally, we have the great digital librarian of this great institution. I acknowledge your presence, Dr. Osamaka. I welcome the council members here present, including the director of ESUT Consult, distinguished Professor Oke Oje. You are welcome. Equally, the Dean, Students Affairs, I acknowledge as a council member, Professor Ifoma Okwo. You are welcome, ma'am. I welcome the chairman, ESUT Inaugural Lecture Committee, distinguished Professor MOVN Ezamenyi. We acknowledge your efforts. All the directors here present, including the director academic planning of this great institution, a man with an atomic pen. I acknowledge a professor of anatomy, Professor Chike Anibeze. Ijele. We equally acknowledge other directors, deans. Because of time, may I respectfully acknowledge all the past inaugural lecturers, including Professor J.U. Mbada, Professor Afamu Obodo, and others. Permit me, because of time, to equally inform the Vice Chancellor About the lecturer of today, Professor Charles Ugu Eze, the former acting Vice Chancellor, Professor of Chemistry Education, and his lovely wife, Mrs. Joy Eze. Let's appreciate them. The Honorable Vice Chancellor, may I inform you of the presence of the former Vice Chancellor of this great institution. I acknowledge the presence of Professor Cypriel Onyeji. I welcome you. I welcome you, Akaji Ugo. I welcome you, Dr. GOC Aja MNI. You are welcome. Our Vice Chancellor, may I equally inform you that we have the great people of Obo Ozara in Opi. They are here in numbers. Asimono Darono, Nono, Dejeno. I welcome all our guests, gentlemen of the press. Because of time, we have to short the protocol. May I welcome you once again to this great chemistry education. On that, may I now invite the chairman of today's occasion, the Vice Chancellor of this great institution, the award-winning.
And we used to specifically appreciate the presence of the former Vice Chancellor, Professor Cypriel Onyeji. Well, the former acting VC will need to be introduced. That's the chief host today. The former rector, who is here, live. Even beside him is Professor Siokanya. I appreciate all of you. I welcome our former SSG, Professor, Doctor, now Professor, GOC Aja. We equally welcome former Accountant General, I think Professor Coley is here. You're welcome. We welcome all of you. We start on a note of apologies that we started around 10:30, 11:30. We had an emergency and we started a meeting at 10:15, rushing to finish so that we'll start, because we still commit to resolve that quota in ESUT, a quorum in ESUT means time. So let me appreciate you and crave your indulgence to accept the 30 minutes delay. Today, we are being fed with a very critical issue, which is staring all of us on the face: teacher factor. It calls to question, who is a teacher? Who is a teacher? Is a teacher merely the salary earner? Is a teacher the driving force that is serving as both pilot or driver? The teacher that ought to be appreciated, the teacher that ought to be celebrated. I was perusing through the social media, and I saw a striking thing in ESUT. I wouldn't know whether it was this week or when I was away, but I saw it. A teacher was teaching, and the students, she didn't know that they were waiting for her birthday. This thing happened this week, I think. Last week. Yes, I saw it in social media. And as she was concluding the lecture, they besieged her with all forms of praise and appreciation that even made her to shed tears. Why did they do that? because she had built trust. She had treated them as a mother. She had delivered what they wanted to know. She had built human being and their capacity. I would love to see that teacher next week so that I will equally give her a handshake. The critical point today, which might not be the centerpiece of the discourse by Professor Eze, is to underscore the critical role teachers play in any setting. Are we building? Are we dismantling? What will our students say or speak about us when we are not there? Are we going to be celebrated? Or will it be a thing of joy that you are out of the system? They will heave a sigh of relief. That is why, whether you are talking of secondary education or any level of education, it is very important to always ask that critical question. What will my students always say at my back, behind me? Even Jesus Christ remembered to instigate reflection when he asked the disciples, what did people say? Who did people say I am? I'm not encouraging all of us to ask our colleagues so, because you might get an answer you don't like. But I'm only trying to reflect on that, to speak about, don't think about what they will say. Think about what posterity will say about you. Think about what posterity will speak on you for or against. Don't be afraid. When people speak ill, it means you are doing well. Don't be afraid to be receiving accolades. Anybody that is receiving acceptance, 100% accolades, will likely die before his time or her time. Because you'll be too careless with people, thinking they are with you. Even the so-called people that love Jesus Christ eventually turned around or said they loved him and killed him. It should be a lesson for all of us. Do what you consider right, irrespective of whose ox is God. So today is teacher-centered teaching, teacher-centered learning. And I congratulate Professor Eze because that thing wasn't coming again. Most of you ran away from presenting your inaugural lectures. But he has come back again, with or without that thing, which you know, to say, I want to present inaugural lecture. Before you say that, it means you are courageous. I've tried to tell us that inaugural lecture, even though academic offer, reflects announcing yourself to the academic community that you are a professor. So if you fail to announce yourself, it is not a sin or a crime, but it means you are still under professorial incubation. That's why this year that I'll be hosting again the inaugural lecturers, we would like to see maybe Gentiles infiltrating. We want to see inaugural lecturers that are reflecting, carrying the banner that they have registered their presence. When you want to retire, you equally have the one you ought to present. So it becomes a challenge to all of us. Am I earning salary as a professor, but I have not announced myself to the university community that I'm already professing? Or am I already professing by being an inaugural lecturer? You don't have a choice. You must present inaugural lecture. You must present it. So I will not take time to start discussing, otherwise I will turn around to make your work meaningless. Today is your day. You have to harvest all of us. You have to collate ideas. You have to center this teaching. Let us learn. Because I cannot claim to know much about science education, but I can always know little about a teacher. So come and lead us in this discussion on how it can lead to what we call transmogrification of a society. Because the society has to transmute from point A to point B in a qualitative manner. So we'll relate your teaching later to the global teaching on what is actually the global practice. DAP will tell you that when we now look at ourselves from what is happening and what we have encountered as global teaching, we know that we need to step up, and step up. But we have no hiding place. We must move at that pace. We must get to a certain point where people will be coming to learn the actual act of teaching from Enugu State University of Science and Technology. Let me thank you again, congratulate you again, and welcome all our distinguished guests, and congratulate the group led by Professor Zamenyi for always leading the way and following the correct footpath for this intellectual engagement, intellectual discourses, so that we can learn from this. We'll learn from so many people before. We're going to learn from you again, more especially with an added burden. The added burden is a former Vice Chancellor. So you will not only listen to him as professors that you used to know, but as a former Vice Chancellor. So congratulations, and we welcome all of you, and thank you so much for today.
I believe you can do better than this. Let's appreciate our Vice Chancellor and the chairman of today's event. Thank you. Honorable Vice Chancellor, with your kind permission, may I inform you of the presence of the traditional Prime Minister of Ogbozala in OP, a legal luminary, now a custodian of culture, Chief Barrister Sylvester Ona. Hello, I welcome you. May I further acknowledge Honorable Engineer Ike Ugwegede. I acknowledge your presence, and of course, Professor Ugushiwu Boniface. We welcome you. The Vice Chancellor, we have the former Secretary of Nigerian Union Teachers. We have the former #1 teacher, Dr. Ike Ene. You are welcome. We equally appreciate our own, the former Provost, College of Medicine, the CMD St. Patrick's Hospital, Enugu, Nigeria, Professor Frank Ezugu Law. Thank you. The Vice Chancellor, with their permission, may I now invite the ESUT to usher in the global man, the Professor of Chemistry Education, and his lovely wife to their seat. Something to eat. You're working with your wife. Thank you. Thank you. The Honorable Vice Chancellor, permit me hello, Yes. Oh no, God bless you. This is to indicate that this is truly academic of Allah. Yes, truly academic of Allah, of Professor Ugogu Eze. Now once again, welcome the former Commissioner for Capital Territory, the then Ministry of Capital Territory Authority, Engineer I.N.A. Ugwegede. You are now the incumbent Southeast Rep in our Communication Commission. No, once again, thank you. Now, may I now invite a professor of anatomy, a man who have come with the anatomic pen to present the citation of a professor of chemistry education. May I invite you, our Director, Academic Planning. I invite Professor Ugo Eze to step out for his citation.
As past inaugural lecturers, I also welcome my very good friend who we are in a Sakaita together, Ike Ugwegede. You're welcome. And distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in the timeless wisdom of the Chinese old master, Lao Tzu, to attain knowledge, add things every day. To attain wisdom, remove things every day. This simple but ineffaceable remark underscores the profound reflection of the academic vocation, a lifelong pursuit of knowledge and cultivation of wisdom through disciplined learning and intellectual refinement. My Vice Chancellor, sir, today in this hallowed chamber, we gather once again to celebrate one who has exemplified Lao Tzu's ideals through distinguished scholarship and exemplary leadership. I have the pleasure to give the citation of Professor Charles Ugwueze, former acting Vice Chancellor of Enugu State University of Science and Technology, whose inaugural lecture marks another significant milestone in his illustrious career. Born on 22nd September 1965, Professor Charles Ugwueze is a distinguished professor of science education with specialization in chemistry education. He is from Opi in Nsukka local government area of Enugu State of Nigeria. His academic journey reflects a consistent record of excellence. Nsukka in 1988 with a second-class honors upper division. Earlier, he obtained the Nigerian Certificate of Education in Biology Chemistry from Anambra State College of Education, Awka, in 1983, and West African School Certificate with distinction from the Community Secondary School, UTI, in 1980. Before joining ESUT, Professor Eze built a rich teaching career at the secondary school level in Imo and Enugu states, and later taught chemistry education at the Federal College of Education in Hamufu. Across these institutions, he distinguished himself through dedicated service and record that he has successfully supervised to graduation 15 PhD students, 20 master students, and numerous undergraduates. It is cheering also to note that some of his doctoral products have attained professorial cadres in the universities where they are currently employed. As an academic, Professor Eze has made notable contributions to scholarship and professional development. His scholarly output comprises 5 books, 2 book chapters, 47 journal articles, and numerous conference papers. He has participated in many national and international professional workshops, contributing significantly to the advancement of science education. He is a member of several professional and learned societies, including the Nigerian Academy of Education, the Science Teachers Association of Nigeria, the Chemical Society of Nigeria, the Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria, the Research Board of Advisors of the American Biographical Institute, and the Nigerian Association for Promotion of Functional Education. In recognition of his consistent academic excellence and service, Professor Eze received the Best Lecturer Award for the Department of Science and Computer Education of ESUT during the 2013-2014 academic session. During his NYSC year, he received a meritorious award from the then Imo State Commissioner for Education, the late Professor Adiela Afibo, for his outstanding service as a chemistry teacher at Community Secondary School, Ebenato Ekwe, whose students achieved the best chemistry result in 1984 WAEC examinations. Professor Charles Eze has made notable contributions to academia through extensive service as external examiner postgraduate programs across several Nigerian universities. He currently serves as external examiner for postgraduate programs in science, chemistry education for 4 Nigerian universities, in addition to other universities where he has served out his tenure. Beyond his immense contributions to the advancement of science education, Professor Eze has distinguished himself as an accomplished university administrator, rendering exceptional service to ESUT in several leadership roles, including acting vice chancellor of ESUT 2020 to 2022, deputy vice chancellor of ESUT 2019 to 2020, director of general studies 2015 to 2019, and deputy director of the Mature Students Program from 2011 to 2015, alongside numerous influential appointments to statutory boards and committees. Professor Eze has made distinguished contributions to academic administration, scholarship, and quality assurance within and beyond ESUT. He served in several editorial and administrative capacities, including managing editor of the ESUT Journal of Education, chairman of the Faculty of Education Teaching Practice Committee, undergraduate research coordinator, and editor of the Journal of Science and Computer Education. Nationally, he was the editor-in-chief of the Nigerian Journal of Functional Education. He has also undertaken external assessments for professorial positions and served as a resource person at the 2023 Third Fund Train the Trainer workshop on research proposal writing and grants management. Professor Eze is a respected scholar whose commitment to academic excellence is showcasing his tactical skills on a checkered drafts board, or unwinding with good music that keeps his spirit energized and inspired. A highly disciplined family man, Professor Eze is happily married to his amiable wife. As pretty as she is, you can observe. And he enjoys the fulfilling family life, blessed with wonderful and accomplished children, whose achievements and values reflect the strong foundation of love, discipline, and excellence that define his home. My Vice Chancellor, sir, and chairman of this intellectual convocation, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pride, admiration, and loud ovation that I present to you the 57th ESUT inaugural lecturer, Professor Charles Ugu Eze, to deliver his inaugural lecture as he delves into the topic, the teacher factor in science education in Nigerian secondary schools, the imperative of stakeholder interventions for sustainable national development.
Thank you. Thank you, ESUT Karatin. Before we now invite for the presentation, with the permission of the Vice Chancellor, may I inform you of the presence of the former Pro-Chancellor of ESUT, the former Secretary to the State Government under the administration of the state, Professor Jacinta Eze. I welcome you. Now, I will now invite to make presentation for 60 minutes. Time has started counting. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. The Executive Governor of Enugu State, His Excellency Dr. Barrister Peter Ndubisimba, to be represented in this August event by a commissioner that is on his way. Members of ESUT Governing Council here present, my employers, the Vice Chancellor of Enugu State University of Science and Technology, Professor Aloysius Michael Sokolie, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Chike Moha, the Registrar and Secretary to Council, my own dear brother, Mr. Ambrose G. Ugu, other members of ESUT management team here present, deans, directors, HODs, professors, and other members of ESUT Senate. Past inaugural lecturers who, by the special grace of God, I will join today. Government officials here present, my Lord, spiritual and temporal, invited guests, royal fathers here present, gentlemen of the press, my dear students, both postgraduate and undergraduate, great ESUT. I'm here by the special grace of God to present the 57th inaugural lecture. And before I go on, I must have to register my appreciation for the Vice Chancellor of this great institution, Professor Aloysius Michael Sokolie, for not only granting me the approval to present this lecture, but also for turning around the academic environment of this great institution. I say this because prior to his assumption of office, ESUT had recorded only 31 inaugural lectures. And here we are talking about the 57th inaugural lecture within a space of 4 years. So he deserves some accolade for that. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chancellor. I also want to thank in a special way the ESUT Inaugural Lecture Committee under the able leadership of Professor MVN Ezame. They've been so wonderful with the encouragement and guidance which has made today a reality. I thank you all. Now, talking about my topic, it is the teacher factor in science education in Nigerian secondary schools. Imperative of stakeholder interventions for sustainable national development. Science, it has been defined in a number of ways by different scholars, one of which is the one by Agbola 2025, which states that science is a body of knowledge which is acquired through observation, experimentation, tests, and local analysis. There's also an interesting definition of science which defines science as a systematic study of the environment which proceeds through observation and experimentation, leading to a unified body of knowledge. Now, scientific investigations are normally carried out using laid-down procedures, and these procedures are collectively referred to as the science method, scientific method of inquiry. And this scientific method consists of some procedural steps which have now outlined observation, formulation of hypotheses, designing and conducting experiments to test the veracity of certain hypotheses, analyzing the results obtained from hypothesis testing, and drawing conclusions or inferences based on results of data analysis. Scientific investigations are not closed-ended. For what is discovered today can give rise to further investigations, thereby deepening the frontiers of knowledge. So what is found today is not final. Of course, sciences are known for curiosity. They keep inquiring into what is on ground. And a case in point is the case of the atom, which was originally, in our days, defined as the smallest indivisible particle of an element. But shortly after, another scientist, curious about confirming whether this is true, found out that an atom is divisible into three distinct parts: protons, neutrons, and electrons. Not just that, further investigations by other scientists found out that the nucleus of an atom, mainly radioactive elements, when subjected under the influence of an electromagnetic field, emits three distinct particles. These particles are alpha particles, beta particles, and gamma rays. So that just goes to show that scientific knowledge keeps evolving, old ones giving way to new ones. Now, science has two dimensions, which are the process and product dimension. The process dimension, in a nutshell, talks about the steps or procedures employed in the course of carrying out scientific investigations. And when scientists do that, they normally employ some skills known as science process skills. These science process skills are categorized into two: the basic process skills and integrated process skills, in order of their difficulty in application. Then the product aspect deals with the outcome of investigations, which could be tangible or intangible. As the name connotes, if it's intangible, you cannot feel it, but they are a body of scientific knowledge, which includes facts, principles, concepts, theories, and laws that govern a number of topics and concepts in various science subjects. Then the tangible aspects are the technologies, materials, and inventions from scientific knowledge, which many of them are bound here. That I'm not feeling very hot here is because there is a fan. And if this place turns to be very dark, I mean, at night we can still see ourselves because of products of science. These are tangible products. Then talking about science, you cannot easily talk about science without technology. Science, we have been told, is a systematic study of the environment. Its relationship with technology, which is basically the application of scientific knowledge to the solution of human problems can be likened to the relationship between two sides of a coin. None can exist without the other. It's perhaps in recognition of the contributions of science and technology that the federal government promulgated the National Policy on Science, Technology, and Innovation. And this policy seeks to integrate science and technology into the nation's economic, social, and other aspects, security aspects. And in doing this, it makes use of a strategy that ensures the development of manpower that is needed in various sectors of the economy. The various specialists in science and technology that we have that drive innovations in different aspects of the economy, like medical doctors, engineers, and other professionals, owe their origin or whatever expertise they have to science. And so it makes sense to reason that for Nigeria to keep producing these professionals, there is need to have a framework, an organized one for that matter, that lays the necessary foundations for these experts to test of science education and education in science. Science education is simply the art of providing professional training to some individuals in specific science disciplines and also equipping them with the pedagogical competencies for impartation of scientific knowledge to prospective learners. So in a nutshell, for one to qualify as a science educator, the person has to be highly knowledgeable in a specific science discipline, say biology, chemistry, physics, and all other science subjects. But in addition, the person has to be well equipped with the methodology, how to impart such knowledge to prospective learners. And that is the science educator for you. Then people who are said to be educated in science are the core scientists. A good number of them are here. The anatomists, the medical doctors, and the rest of them. They are educated in science. They are not science educators. And if they wish to be science educators, they can take up postgraduate diploma in education, and that qualifies them to be called and be referred to as teachers. Jesus. Okay. I have to talk about national development and sustainable development. National development is a measure of the ability of a country to improve the general well-being of its citizens through the provision of social amenities like good road network, quality education, potable water supply, healthcare delivery, and the rest of them. So national development can be measured using certain parameters, such as GDP, gross domestic product, per capita income, which is the total earnings of a country divided by the population. This does not really give us a good measure of how wealthy a country is, because if you divide by the population, you can ask yourself, what do you get in return? It is in the custody of a few hands, and yet you say the country is this rich or poor. So a better measure of the state of development in a country is the purchasing power parity. That is the one that compares currencies of different nations, what they can purchase. If you are given a fund like this, how much in dollars will you pay and how much in naira will you pay? So if the difference is so wide, for the country that spends so much, development cannot be said to be on a high side. They are related to national development is sustainable national development, which is the type of development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This calls for responsible consumption and exploitation of natural resources, bearing in mind that what you need to meet your needs presently will also be needed by future generations. So if we live our lives in such a way that people coming after us will be in perpetual servitude or suffering, then we are not consuming or exploiting the environment responsibly and sustainably. There are aspects of sustainable national development that relate more to science, and they are basically the ones that concern environmental protection. You can see something like fish there. They need to be protected, and we don't consume them as though future generations will not make use of them. They also have a life on land, preservation and protection of terrestrial ecosystem. Then, how do we foster national development through science education? We've mentioned that science and technology have significantly influenced the world in a number of ways. It could be positive or negative, but we are concerned about the positive influence. And it is in recognition of the importance of science and technology that the national policy on science, technology, and technology education outlined the objectives of Nigerian secondary school education to include the following: production of scientists for national growth, fostering technological advancement, promoting scientific literacy for informed decisions, encouraging the acquisition of practical skills and applying scientific methods to real-world issues and sustainable development. That was in 2018 that the policy was promulgated. So the fact remains that for this laudable are ensured, and also to ensure the inculcation of scientific literacy in learners at secondary school level, to equip them with the knowledge, skills, and competencies needed to live sustainably and responsibly in their environments. And to do this, there is need for a clearly defined educational program with strong emphasis at the lower level of the tutelage of a science educator, be it in biology, chemistry, physics, agriculture, and the rest of them. It's only possible through effective science teaching. And effective science teaching helps students develop an understanding of scientific concepts and an appreciation of the role of science in everyday life. It is geared towards inculcating in students some 21st century skills which are essential for living in today's global and digital world. These skills are generally referred to as the 4 C's. So in the course of science teaching, efforts should be made to impart critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication in the students. Critical thinking ensures that the students are allowed to think out possible solutions to existing scientific problems, especially when the teacher is not there. Then creativity is a way of thinking outside the box, not always following the stereotypes that this is the way it has always been done and this is how it has to be done all the time. One who is creative tries to seek alternative ways of solving a particular problem. So we try as much as possible to imbibe in the students the culture of creativity, having creative minds to think out things for themselves. The collaboration entails having the students work in teams to solve particular scientific problems. The communication, scientific investigations become meaningless if there are no efforts to communicate the results to others. So while one is asked to or required to be able to carry out investigations, it's also important that one is able to communicate effectively the findings of a particular investigation. And this can be oral, it can be written, it can be non-verbal. Then, in the course of effective science teaching, efforts should be made to ensure the following: hands-on experiments. That is a situation you allow students to have direct sensory experience with learning materials instead of telling them about science. Of course, it is not normal that in a proper science classroom, a teacher will dominate it. Gone are the days where classroom teaching, especially for science, was teacher-centered, with the teacher acting as a repository of knowledge, dishing out knowledge, and the students become passive listeners. These days, it calls for the active participation of the learners. They must be involved in the teaching learning process, doing things for themselves, encountering problems, and then finding ways of solving them. Inquiry-based learning makes students to be at the center of the teaching learning process, where they are given opportunities to ask questions, even among themselves and even to the teacher himself. And this requires that the teacher has to be well prepared ahead of the students. Otherwise, he will feel embarrassed. When students begin to ask questions the teacher knows little or nothing about. And it's not uncommon to find in such situations the teacher becoming confrontational, trying to shout them down as a defense mechanism. This is not expected of a good. There is the belief that in any teaching learning situation, children or the learners come in with what they have as preconceived ideas about what is going to be taught. Some of them may be in line with proper scientific conceptions, others may be wrong. It is the duty of the teacher to act as a facilitator, helping those with correct perceptions to consolidate what they already have, and then those that have wrong perception to shift from their initial positions to the proper way of conceiving such science concepts. The status of science education in Nigerian secondary schools. To fully understand how science is being taught at these levels, is important that we look at the trajectory from primary school level through junior secondary to senior secondary. And talking about the primary school level, we all know that in our setting, it has not basically changed. You find a teacher managing a particular class, you can say married to a class, teaching all there is to teach in the school curriculum. And most science, the worst hit are the science subjects. Some of these teachers are not grounded in sciences. And you can imagine what they will give. We all know one cannot give what he or she doesn't have. So there is need to maybe look at how to solve this situation. People in private schools are already out of the problem because they have specialist teachers. Where my children schooled at University Secondary Primary School, we are specialist teachers in science especially, that taught science, integrated basic science to pupils in all the primary classes. Then at the junior secondary level, the situation is not different from what obtains at the primary. The only difference is that the teachers there are academically qualified, but the way they go about their duties is something else. Many of them do not make sufficient efforts to engage the students with laboratory activities. In fact, you can count very few schools where students are taken to laboratory at junior secondary. They only know that they have a laboratory when they get to senior classes. Then at the senior secondary level, science is taught as discrete subjects such as biology, chemistry, physics, agriculture, mathematics, and so on and so forth. And at that level, we discovered that there are elaborate curricular provisions for the teaching of the basic science subjects as provided by the body in charge of drawing the curriculum for secondary schools, and that is the National Educational Research and Development Council. It is the body charged with the curriculum of senior secondary school. They produce the curriculum, and the curriculum gets revised as the need arises. The one that is in operation now, that came up in 2025, has some additions, such as Additions that address real-life problems such as deforestation, reforestation, biodiversity, pollution, and waste management. These are new additions to the biology curriculum. In chemistry and other subjects, chemistry, for instance, has new green energy, green chemistry being added, and also ozone layer depletion. That is an addition. In arts and humanities, there are 3 categories: science options, arts and humanities, and then business options. For these ones that are in arts, humanities, or business options, they no longer have the latitude to choose at least one science subject for senior secondary. Subjects they can study up to SS3. And we know the implication of this. We are talking about living in a world that is dominated by science, regulated, driven by science, and students at that level are no longer enabled to acquire scientific literacy. If they don't study at least one science subject, how would they know that science is important? Without being a scientist, you should be able to understand and give little explanation that things that happen around you that owe themselves to science origin. For instance, the fan we have here, it doesn't require somebody becoming an engineer to know that there is energy conversion there. It operates through the principle of electromagnetism, where electricity is converted to mechanical rotational energy. The engineers and physicists here, pardon my invention into your territory, but we are in the business of science. So generally, one can observe that science teaching at the secondary school level, curriculum implementation, is not something to write home about. I'll give you an example. The situation in most secondary schools, both at federal and state levels, in almost all the states of the federation, is that the teaching of theory and practical is compartmentalized, such that when one is being taught practical, the person wouldn't know that it has relationship with the theory aspect he has done. A case in point is the usual volumetric analysis for those who did chemistry up to SS3 or class 5, as it was in our own days. That is simply a reaction known as neutralization reaction. This neutralization reaction is taught under the broad topic acids, bases, and salts. The teachers will teach these topics and wait until first term of SS3. Then students go to the lab to begin to learn how to perform volumetric analysis. So there is no link between what they have been taught before and what they are experiencing. They will think this one exists on its own, but that is not the way it should be done. For every topic you teach, there's hardly any science topic that cannot be taught using practical. So, but we tend to see them at that level as standing alone, probably because the examinations are conducted differently, but they are just one and the same thing about the same science subject. Now, having observed that there is poor curriculum implementation at the secondary school level, one may be tempted to ask, could there be that there are some constraints that militate against teachers' effectiveness in instructional delivery? There are some constraints that are government or stakeholder related, and these are the ones we are going to look at. One of them is underfunding of education sector. You have before you, I hope you can see it, the budget, Nigeria's annual budget for 2020, from 2020 to 2025. Looking at the budget, you can see it is gradually increasing by year. But the proportion of it that is allocated to education, you can see it has no pattern. You can see 2021, it dropped. Even when the budgetary allocation, the budget has increased. Then the margin keeps fluctuating. 2025, 3.52 trillion was budgeted, and the percentage allotted to education is 7.3%. And this is a gross violation of the UNESCO recommendation, which prescribes that 15 to 20% of the budget, annual budget of any nation should be allocated to the education sector. So you can see that we are not in any way near that benchmark. But it's important to note with interest that Enugu State government is an exception to this rule, because the government has consistently, since the present government, since it came into power from 2024 to 2026, allocated more than 30% of the budget to education. So it goes to show the way the government of the day has, where it has placed education. And if the budgetary allocation to education is high, the thinking is that it should spread to all sectors of the education sector, including schools, secondary schools. Well, I hope the present emphasis on that will tend to draw them back. So it's expected. I know the government is proactive. They must be doing something about it. So that is talking about budgetary allocation. Then we also have paucity of qualified teachers. In most of the secondary schools, both, well, I'm sure of state secondary schools, they are grossly in need of qualified science teachers. It wasn't up to 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, somebody just stated in a WhatsApp group I belong to that the only mathematics teacher in my home secondary school, OP High School, is an NCE holder. Just one person teaching. I don't know how many he will be able to teach. It's just an example of what obtains in so many rural schools. We're not talking about the urban schools, because I think those ones are even overflooded with teachers. So the rural secondary schools have to be factored into efforts that are aimed at maybe recruiting teachers to man schools. The inadequate infrastructural facilities, this has a link with poor budgetary allocation. If enough funds are not there, little wonder what the management can do. So that is a problem that impairs effective teaching. A worrisome situation there is, a factor there is poor teacher motivation. Of course, this one is a problem that is seriously affecting the education sector. You have situations where teachers, even when they are there, they are not showing enough commitment because they feel they are not being recognized by the society. And we all know it. We can ask ourselves here, how many of us have the awards attending state secondary schools? How many? I cannot count up to 20% here. We all take our children to private institutions where we feel they'll be given the desired attention. And in a good number of these private schools, teachers are well taken care of. So teachers at the secondary school level, science teachers, they feel derided, and the society has to be blamed for that. Globally, there is a metric that gives an indication of how teachers are treated. And that is talking about Global Teachers Status Index. It shows how teachers are regarded in certain climes. For us, in Africa, especially Nigeria, teachers are the drag of the society. And that is why a parent can even go to a school and begin to slap a teacher for flogging his or her child. So it is a major problem that militates against effective teaching. And even people's interest in teaching as a whole, there should be some incentives. I remember in our days, I taught at secondary school level for a very long time. We used to enjoy what is known as science teachers allowance. Science teachers allowance. That amount was very paltry, very small, but it did some good. When you know you are getting something extra in comparison with your other teachers, you feel that you are being recognized and then begin to do more. I hope you are not visiting me. Okay. So, other constraints that are not the making of teachers include poor supervision of instructions. You find this very effective in private schools. In the public schools, because of people are dissatisfied, they may not even have the facilities to visit schools regularly. In our days, State Education Commission, the offices had buses, which they used to visit schools regularly to know how teachers are complying with their instructional duties. These days, one hardly gets supervisors visit a school even twice in a year. And when teachers know they are not being supervised, your guess is as good as mine. They can do other things, play truancy, do some other things other than their teaching job. Of the challenges involved in teaching science. And so it becomes a problem. Once you go once, second, and the teacher rebuffs you, the next thing is for you to resort to telling the students about science instead of teaching them science. That is not expected. Then the constraints that are teacher-related include use of ineffective, so inappropriate teaching approaches. Most teachers resort to use of methods that do not actively involve students in the teaching learning process, like lecture method has been recognized as an ineffective method of science teaching. Inadequate preparation for science instructions. For a teacher to effectively teach science, he has to prepare, read ahead of the students, prepare the chemicals or solutions for practical work, try out experiments on his own, then set the lab for students to come and have direct contact with teaching materials. And at the end of the day, of course, while the laboratory session is on, the teacher moves from one position to the other, trying to know the peculiar problems students are having. A teacher who is ill-prepared cannot perform these roles. Lack of skills in improvisation. It's not every time that you have all the standard instructional materials available for science teaching. So a resourceful science teacher, a science educator should be able to look inwards, especially in the environment, to see if there are things that can be brought from the environment to enhance students' understanding of certain concepts. For want of time, we can go to some of my contributions to knowledge. As a science educator, the focus of my researches has been in the area of pedagogy, with emphasis on how to improve instructional delivery and subsequently foster students' learning outcomes. Some of them include the following. The ones that are germane to this lecture are listed. First one, which happens to be my first research output, carried out with my supervisor then, is diagnosis of students' difficulties in the application of the IUPAC system of nomenclature in inorganic chemistry. IUPAC is the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry. It is a system of naming compounds, and this was specific to inorganic compounds. This study was a survey which was aimed at finding out the problems these students experienced. And it was found out that they had problems in determining the oxidation numbers of elements in compounds. And even when the correct oxidation numbers are known, the application becomes a problem. The students also have problem in using prefixes like di, tri, and tetra. These are concepts you bring into nomenclature. The next one is an investigation into scientific literacy levels of teachers of basic science in junior secondary schools in Nsukka Education Zone. This was carried out to determine the level of scientific literacy possessed by basic science teachers, basically NCE holders, because it was discovered that they were performing at, below par. And it was found out that, of course, this was also a survey, and the instrument for data collection was test of understanding scientific literacy. It was administered to teachers to determine how knowledgeable they are in the understanding application of science. And it was found out that a good number of them, majority of them, had low level of scientific literacy, others at moderate level, and very few had high level of scientific literacy. The third is fostering students' understanding of organic chemical nomenclature using the target task approach. It's in line with the first research, having found that students have difficulty in IPAC nomenclature. We tried, myself and my colleague, Ezano CA, tried to explore through quasi-experimental procedure how the use of target task approach could help students understand inorganic chemical nomenclature. So the results show that target task approach, which is innovative in nature, had a facilitative effect on students' understanding of chemical nomenclature with respect to organic compounds. The fourth one is a study I did with my first PhD graduate this year and a reader. Effect of learning activity package instructional strategy on students' academic achievement in senior secondary school. This study was carried out in AFIP Education Zone. It was also a quasi-experiment involving the use of a learning activity package. It's a kind of computer-assisted instruction where problems were presented to students in sequence. And it was found out that this strategy fostered students' achievement in senior secondary school chemistry relative to their counterparts in the control group that were taught using lecture method. There are also other studies like the one Impact of tutorial and drill and practice modes of computer-assisted instructions on male and female students' achievement in secondary school chemistry. You can see all this were chemistry because I specialize in chemistry education. So these are studies carried out to explore the efficacy of innovative science system methods. And in each of these studies, like the one by Eze, Ebo, and Omeje, students were found to benefit more from instructional delivery using those innovative approaches in preference to their counterparts that were taught using the traditional lecture method. Now, the way forward. Having explored the teaching of science at secondary school level and having explored the problems being encountered, the following are recommended as the way forward to improve the teaching of science in our secondary schools with a view to also improving sustainable development. First, it's that there should be increased budgetary allocation to the education sector with efforts made to ensure that secondary education gets its fair share of the appropriation to cater for the provision of facilities and learning materials for effective teaching and learning of science subjects. Secondly, more qualified science teachers should be employed by the government to fill existing vacancies in secondary schools, especially those in rural schools. And in doing this, of course, the recruitment process should be merit-based, not politically motivated, if we want the teachers to do justice to the teaching of the subjects. And because of the observed atrophy of teachers in rural schools, the government can devise a way of retaining the newly employed teachers for a definite number of years, probably not below 5 years, so that they can enter into a contractual agreement with newly employed teachers for them to remain in their new schools, especially in the rural areas, for at least 5 years before seeking transfer to other schools, because everybody would want to go to urban area. So if you know you must be employed as a teacher in a rural school, sign a bond that you will remain there for at least 5 years. It can be more than that. Then in addition to that, there could be incentives for those that have elected to work in those schools. A little package other than what is given to everybody. Then government should pay priority attention to provision of infrastructural facilities if the resources are there, and other appurtenances that are needed for effective science teaching. For instance, laboratories should be well equipped with necessary equipment and expendables. The expendables are the ones you use once and then discard. If you use some chemicals for chemical reaction, you cannot recover them. A chemical change has taken place. So what you are dealing with is a new product. So if you now want to repeat the same experiment, you must apply for resources, for funds, which some non-science inclined school has always object to. Seminars and workshops should intermittently be organized by government through its relevant agencies to educate the school principals, especially the ones that are not science inclined, to see the need to always pay particular attention and special attention to science departments in their schools. It's not, you cannot equate them to other subjects that can be taught only in classrooms. Then parents should not, out of frustration, of course I didn't dwell on this because of want of time, push their children and wards into science education, to science education programs in universities and allied institutions, especially when such children and wards have no flair for teaching as a career. By this, I mean the fact that we still find in some of our secondary schools teachers who, by what they have as certificates, are qualified to teach science, but they've been engaged, but they don't teach effectively because they don't have the interest in teaching as a profession. My colleagues in Faculty of Education, especially science-related disciplines, will once in a while, in the course of teaching, ask students, how many of you would like to be teachers? You can find that in a class of 50 students, not up to 20 will raise their hands, implying that they are there out of frustration. So we can see that we are not recruiting teachers for sustainability. Sustainable development doesn't always concern material things, you see. So if in our education system we don't have plans that when we leave, the teachers coming after us will be as dedicated as we were, then there's a problem. Then we also have a recommendation that scientific literacy by the generality of the citizenry, given the need for scientific literacy by the generality of the citizenry, the NERDC is implored to revisit the current curriculum offerings in Nigerian secondary schools so that students should be made to register and study at least one science subject in senior secondary. This will enable them to be more scientifically literate. Then, with all this, because in every inaugural lecture, there's what we take away. What are we taking away from this lecture? And that is what we are talking about now. What we should take away is that in this lecture, it has been emphasized that science teaching equips its recipients with in-depth knowledge of some science disciplines, as well as that science education, as well as pedagogical skills and competencies needed to impart such knowledge to others who are deemed to be less knowledgeable. So it's not that just enough that you know chemistry very well, physics very well. If you are not grounded in methodology, you cannot effectively teach the subject. What we'll be doing will be akin to what obtained in the 90s, 80s, where we had auxiliary teachers. Somebody will finish class 5 and come back to the same school, begin to teach those he left at class 4. So they will just be pouring out knowledge with no attempt made to ensure that the students understand what is being taught. The second takeaway is that possession of some level of scientific literacy is a sine qua non for man's comfortable existence in today's world, as he continually being influenced by science and technology, either positively or negatively. We have positive and negative aspects of science and technology. So there is every need for all and sundry, whether you are an expert in science or not, to know a bit of science, especially the one that will enable you to live comfortably and sustainably in the world we are in, towards inculcating 21st century skills in the learners. It's not all about telling them about science. You must give them ample opportunity to participate actively in the teaching learning process. Effective science teaching should essentially be activity-oriented, involving students' active participation in the instructional process, using hands-on activities that are context-based, drawing examples from things that are within the environment. Science teachers should de-emphasize the use of lecture and other teacher-centered methods of teaching, but should rather adopt innovative teaching strategies that are student-centered. Some of them I have studied with my colleagues, and they were found to be efficacious. A good number of the young science teachers in Nigerian secondary schools do not seem to have interest in teaching as a profession. Their impressive academic qualifications notwithstanding, and we know why. Some of them are there by accident. These are people that originally applied for the much sought after courses like medicine, pharmacy, computer science, and the rest of them. Because of their low scores, they don't find places in those departments. The next alternative is to push them to departments that hardly meet 1/10 of the admission quota. And that is when we begin to have students in science education. We teach the students. They are not dull. They will do well, but they are just there to acquire the certificate. And at the end of the day, because of unemployment, they will be employed to teach. And when they get there, there will be the service to the system. So there's need for parents to know the limit they can push their words into courses they don't have interest in. You should guide them, but don't dictate for them. Evaluation of learning outcomes in science at the secondary school level dwells mainly on cognition. That's what students can think out, with little or no attempts made by the science teachers to have in situ assessment, that is on-the-spot assessment of the skills being exhibited by students in the course of carrying out practicals. In a good number of cases, the high grades obtained by students in external examinations, WAEC and NECO examinations, do not really reflect the abilities of their abilities in the sciences because of the prevalence of examination malpractice in the schools. Because of want of time, I didn't dwell on it, but we know it is a cankerworm that is eating deep into the educational sector, especially at that level. It's also there at our level, whether we like it or not. Malpractice. So, but this one is worrisome because at the end of the day, students come out with unmerited grades, which qualifies them for admission into tertiary institutions. But unfortunately, when they get there, they can hardly cope because they lack the necessary entry behavior. They don't know much, and they're expected to learn more. Then, given the important roles of secondary school science teachers in national development, there's a compelling need for their welfare to be given priority attention by their employers. We are recommending that the now abandoned science teachers' allowance can be restored. No matter how little it is, it will do the good of making these teachers feel that they are performing peculiar services. Of course, their services are very peculiar and hazardous for that matter. So there must be something to pat them on the back in recognition of the efforts they are making in science instruction law, immensely for providing the much desired academic and administrative leadership in the university, which has enabled my presentation of this inaugural lecture. I also commend the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Chike Nwaha, the Registrar, Mr. Ambrose Jirugu, and other principal officers for working in synergy with the Vice Chancellor to move our esteemed university to greater heights. I thank the ESUT Inaugural Lecture Committee led by Professor MVN Ezamei for providing the necessary advice, guidance that led to the improvement of the quality of this lecture. I remain profoundly grateful to the committee. At this juncture, I wish to appreciate my late parents, Igwe Chebo Onoimeze, that's my father, and Lolo Ezugwe, my mother, as well as my stepmother, Oima Abomeze, under whose love and care I grew up as a child. I grew up as a child, having lost my biological mother as a toddler. The man standing before you didn't know his mother, but God has kept me alive because I had a good stepmother. Unlike most stepmothers these days, this woman took me as her son. Being the 10th and last child in my polygamous family, I enjoyed tremendous support for my education, not only from my parents, but also from my siblings, 5 of whom are late. May their souls continue to rest in peace. I'm particularly grateful to my immediate elder brother, Richard. Are you there? Richard. Okay. For not hearkening to the advice of one of his friends, he may have forgotten that I should proceed immediately to teacher training college on completion of my secondary education. Even with the distinction, the advice was that I should go to teacher training. But in his wisdom, he resisted it. And here I am, standing before you as a professor. What's happening? It's not moving on. Okay. What's happening? I don't have. Can I have one? Nine, okay. Okay.
Look at the screen. Go ahead.
Yes. I owe a debt of gratitude to all my, Yes, I owe a debt of gratitude to all my supervisors and lecturers at different levels of my higher education. Prominent among them is Professor Dieneze of blessed memory, who supervised my master's and PhD thesis. Okay. Yes, who supervised my master's and PhD thesis at the University of Nigeria. It was Professor Dien who actually opened my eyes to the world of research through his mentorship. But for his demise, Dien would have been here to proudly watch his first PhD product present his inaugural lecture. Eternal rest grant him, O Lord. I also remain grateful to Professor E.O. Akwezilo and Dr. Chukwuemeka B. Madmelu. Madmelu is late, for the solid foundation in chemistry, which I received from them at Anambra State College of Education, Oka. It's now moribund. You can't find the school anymore. Which enabled my seamless academic pursuit in chemistry education at the university level. They gave me a very sound foundation. Fondly remembered also as my former lecturers at NCE level are Professor E.U. Akusoba and our own Professor A.C.O. Aniodo, who, by their peculiar methods of instructional delivery, always increased my entropy. Those in sciences know what entropy is, making me feel as if I knew next to nothing in chemistry. I was therefore constrained to put in extra efforts in their courses, and at the end of the day, I always made good grades in those chemistry courses. So it was nonetheless a rewarding experience, and I thank them immensely for that. In the course of my education at University of Nigeria, Nsukka, some of my former lecturers stand out for the positive impact they made on me academically. They include Dr. Frank Onwodi, late, Dr. Frank Mwabwe, and Dr. L.E.S. Akpanisi, who taught me physical, inorganic, and organic chemistry courses, respectively. In the Faculty of Education of the University, Professor Anthony Ali, late, Professor Elizabeth Eke, and Professor B.G. Nwogu are highly appreciated for the erudition they brought to bear on the academic courses they taught me at different levels of my postgraduate program. The circumstance of my employment in ESUT is a testament to the aphorism that information rules the world. I got to know about the newspaper advert for some academic positions in ESUT in 1998 through Mr. Sans Nugoke, the former National SANU chairman, in the course of my interaction with him in a drinking joint at Nsukka. So it's always good to reach out. Yes. I later looked for the newspaper and subsequently applied for the position of lecturer 2, which I got after a rigorous interview. It's on record that our set was the last that was employed through interview. It's verifiable. There are no P2B. So that was the beginning of my academic journey in ESUT, which I partly owed to Uncle Sam for divulging the information to me in the first place. I cannot thank him enough for that act of love generously extended to me as an acquaintance then, because we were not friends. It's just that we met there and we started interacting. As a lecturer in the Department of Science and Technical Education, which has now metamorphosed into Department of Science Education, I have enjoyed and continue to enjoy the cooperation and support of my colleagues. Notable among them were late Professors J.O. Mobo and E.C. Iloptife, who were actually my academic mentors. May their souls rest in peace. Other academic colleagues whose camaraderie I enjoy in the department include Professor C.E. Idoko, Professor C.A. Zano, Professor O.I. Nebo, Professor N.M. Mbajog, Associate Professor B.N. Mweze, and Associate Professor A.C. Obodo, as well as Reverend Sister Dr. Rose Anamezie, Dr. Fidel Nnadi, my HOD, Dr. John Best Ebo, Dr. Cynthia Omeje, and Mr. Tobias Ona. Thanks for maintaining the spirit of love and oneness in the department. Professor Cyprian Onyeji, a former Vice Chancellor of ESUT, is respectively appreciated for the role he played in my promotion and those of my colleagues to the rank of professor. If they are here, they can recollect what transpired. Knowing that due process was followed at all the stages of our professorial assessments, at the end of which many of us were found appointable, Professor Onyeji did not bow to pressure from the then governing council to unnecessarily put our promotions on hold. Eventually, the promotions were released on 6th March 2015 with notional effect on 1st October 2012 and financial effect postdated to 1st May 2015, implying that for 2 months, March and April, we were officially recognized as professors, but earning the salaries of readers. I don't know whether it's an injustice or a fair treatment. I'm also indebted to Professor Luke O. Anike, another former Vice Chancellor of ESUT, for appointing me Director General Studies Division of the University, a position I held from 2015 to 2019 when I was made the Deputy Vice Chancellor. I had a cordial working relationship with Professor Anike and cannot thank him enough for his mean and kind disposition to me. The immediate past governor of Enugu State, His Excellency, Dr. Ifeanyi Lawrence Ogwuanyi, deserves a special note of appreciation for graciously approving my appointment as acting Vice Chancellor of ESUT by the then governing council following the expiration of the 5-year tenure of Professor Luke Anike as the substantive vice chancellor in May 2020. That was the peak of COVID-19 pandemic. So actually, I can see myself as a beneficiary of COVID-19 because at this juncture, I want to thank all those who helped me navigate the murky waters of university administration as acting vice chancellor. The challenges were quite enormous, you can recall, but with their support and wise counsel, I and my management team eventually emerged victorious because the system did not collapse under our watch. Otherwise, my successor wouldn't have met anything. So welcome. Worthy of special mention are the following. Professor Okanya. I hope he's there. Okanya, has he gone? Okay, thank you. Professor Chika Nibeze, of course, my pa. Professor Sonny Udeze. Sonny should be here. Professor Greg Ono, now retired. Professor E. Ogu, now retires. Professor G.I. Ame, still in active service. Prof. Frank Ezugu, my brother. Reverend Father Professor Paul Martin Obai. He played a key role, anointed my office, and kept interceding for me. Professor A.E. Honora too. Professor Clifford I. late. Professor Fred Ohaneze. Professor Chike Moha. Professor Uche Ugwai. Professor Ikechukwu Chidobem. Professor Ifeanyi Didigu. Dr. Onyeka Egwagu. Engineer Oke Animba, the then SANU chairman. Deacon Cosmos Aja, NASU chairman, just to mention a few of them. The invaluable assistance I received from them will forever remain green in my memory. Professor Simon Uotuanya and Professor Malaki Okweze, the then secretary to Enugu State Government and deputy chief of staff to the governor, respectively, are fondly remembered for their wise counsels and also for enabling my unfettered access to the governor whenever I had cause to see His Excellency. I thank them. In a very special way, I want to thank my pretty wife, as you can see. My love, my jewel of inestimable value, and the mother of my amazing children, who are here in their number. Yes, see them. She has been a source of support and inspiration to me since we tied the nuptial knot in 1996. To my children, Chibike, Nnamdi, Chiagozie, Chinemere, Monyedika, Chikos,